Want to go right now to our phones. We have editor at the Insider, Michael Weiss, who's reporting from Europe this morning. Michael, your item caught the attention of both Jonathan Lemire and myself. I asked you to call in, get us updated on Sergei Lavrov working actually with Hungary's government to do what Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are trying to do, and that is re-elect an illiberal leader of Hungary. Tell us all about your reporting.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be with you from sunny Galway this morning. We were in receipt of a series of intercepted phone calls between Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Hungarian Foreign Minister, Peter Cicero, who basically was conspiring with the Kremlin to lift certain EU sanctions on Russia. These sanctions included family members of Alisher Usmanov, who is a very well-connected Russian oligarch, a billionaire close to Putin. The sanctions included companies that were linked to Russia's shadow fleet of false-flagged oil tankers by which the Russian government is enriching itself to bypass international sanctions. They also included prospective banks that the EU wanted to place sanctions on. So it's kind of extraordinary because we had known, it had been reported that the Hungarian government was in conversation with the Russians about this, but to have it chapter and verse, verbatim, we have the audio recordings of these phone calls, we have transcripts of the phone calls, and we've authenticated them using forensic audio investigators who confirm to us these are not deep fakes, these are not forgeries, these are in fact the real thing. And Hungarian Foreign Minister, thankfully, also confirmed the authenticity on Twitter, basically dismissing the whole story as a nothing burger. He says, well, I talked to lots of people. I talked to the Russians, but I also talked to the Europeans. We spoke to the former Lithuanian defense minister who said that that this proves that the Hungarian foreign minister is Putin's mole within the European Commission. And another European intelligence officer that we consulted said, reading these transcripts, if you remove the names, it sounds like a case officer, meaning Lavrov, was running an agent, meaning the Hungarian foreign minister in these transcripts. So, kind of an extraordinary development.
Michael, yeah, it's just extraordinary, especially the timing of it. We had reports, I believe it was The Economist a few weeks ago, that there was a possibility that Russian agents had suggested that there be a faked assassination attempt against Orban to help him in his standing. And again, the coordination between Russia and Hungary to elect Orban, the coordination between this White House, Marco Rubio, and Hungary to re-elect Orban, a man who is stridently pro-Russia and blocks aid to Ukraine and helps Putin at every turn. Could you explain to people, to viewers that may not have followed Hungary as closely as people like you, what's coming up in a couple of weeks and the significance of that election?
Yes. So, I mean, Orban has presided over, one of the biggest regressive cases in post-Cold War Europe. I mean, Hungary's economy is in ruin. It is wholly reliant on Russian oil and gas. Orban himself has embarked over the course of, several years in power, decades really, a series of maneuvers, state capture of the media, putting in place essentially an oligarchic system of control. It's deeply illiberal, his government. It's also, for the first time, deeply, deeply unpopular. Fidesz, his party, is something like 20 points behind in the polls against a challenger who comes from the center right. I mean, is not a left-wing challenger, is culturally conservative in many respects, but essentially wants to restore Hungary to allow it to have normal relations with the neighborhood, including, and most importantly, with the European Union. So Orban his entire campaign right now, Joe, is basically turning Ukraine and President Zelensky into this bogeyman. If you're not for me, if you're not for Fidesz, you want war, or you're an agent of the Ukrainian security services, and that's all he's got. And he's deeply, deeply embattled in a campaign which the election is April 12th. And if things go according to the polls, he's going to lose. Now, the big question, you alluded to all of these sort of provocations and plots. The big question is, if he loses, what is he going to do in concert with the Russians and possibly now with our own U.S. government? Because, as you mentioned, Donald Trump is backing him wholeheartedly to try and steal this election and to remain in power. And how is that going to affect his relationship with the European Union, which could very well expel Hungary for doing something like that?
All right. Editor at The Insider, Michael Weiss, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
For calling from sunny Galway.
Sure.
We greatly appreciate it. Extraordinary reporting. Thank you. Mr. Ambassador, I just want, let's talk about how extraordinary these developments are, that you have Lavrov working with Orban's foreign minister, who basically, he's almost like an agent. He seems like almost like an agent for Lavrov and the Russian government, and both Putin and Trump doing everything they can to elect the most anti-Western, pro-Putin leader in Europe.
Well, Joe, you mentioned just a couple of minutes ago the end of the Soviet Union, Christmas Day, 1991. And we had a great president in George H.W. Bush in foreign policy. And he said that night, Europe is now whole, free, and at peace. And the Russians under Putin and the Hungarians under Orban are challenging that. They're challenging the fact that, Europe is being divided again. And Europe is unfree in the East. And so when President Trump and Secretary Rubio say, we don't have a dog in this fight in Europe, in Ukraine, we have no existential interest. We have a tremendous interest in the outcome of this debate in Eastern Europe and the Hungarian election, but also in stopping Putin. And as you said, this is where NATO comes in. NATO has unified to stop Putin in Ukraine. And I think this is every bit as important strategically to the United States as our contest with China for power, and certainly even the outcome of the Iran war.
And on the subject of other countries, including those in NATO, President Trump just a moment ago tweets on Truth Social, all those nations that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, I have a suggestion. He says, buy some from the U.S., fine. And number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait and just take it. He's saying the hard part's done, go get your oil. Mr. Ambassador, this seems like the president again suggesting that the United States may be ready to pull back out of the region. And even though it was the U.S. and Israel's action that got the Strait of Hormuz closed, Trump's at least threatening to walk away while it's still closed and telling other countries to take action to reopen it.
That would be just extraordinarily irresponsible. You can't imagine Truman or Eisenhower or Ronald Reagan making this decision. Started this war. It was a war of choice. We're in it. And so we're going to need the European allies, as well as the Gulf Arab states, to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. We'll have to do the reopening, but then to keep it open if there's some kind of diplomatic arrangement. So this is really foolish to trash your allies when they're the countries you need in the end game as we approach some kind of negotiation with the Iranians to stop the fighting and to reopen, 20% of the world's oil supply to the global economy. And the Europeans have already met the French and the British and the Germans and others, and they said they will be there when the fighting stops, and they'll help police the Strait of Hormuz. And so what's the value to the United States now in dragging them down? I just don't get the logic of this, but then again, I think it's indicative of the way this administration has treated our allies.
Former United States Ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We'll hope to have you back very soon. Take care.